And a state of emergency is declared in Haiti following a 7.2 magnitude earthquake. At least 29 people are reportedly killed. The Prime Minister said the quake had caused huge damage across the south of the country. With fighting continuing in Afghanistan, President Ghani addresses the nation, saying that remobilizing the military against the Taliban is his top priority. The group have reportedly taken over the city of Mazar-i-Sharif. And in the UK, questions for police about why Jake Davison was given his gun after he was accused of assault last September. He went on to kill 5 people before turning the gun on himself in the UK's worst mass shooting since 2010.
He's made a series of missteps here, unfortunately, having to do...
News contributor Tom Bossert, a former White House Homeland Security officer. Tom, good morning. Do you think President Biden made a misstep by giving a target date, by saying exactly when we would be withdrawing from Afghanistan?
Dan, good morning. He's made a series of missteps here, unfortunately, having to do with the timing of our withdrawal, but also, I think, more importantly, with the objectives of our presence. And so he's now, this month, continued to say we weren't there to nation-state build and not acknowledge some of the other more obvious counterterrorism objectives of our presence there. And the timing of this has led to a very predictable Taliban resurgence. They now have over a dozen provincial capitals of the 34.
Yeah, it's a disturbing situation. To be clear, your former boss, President Trump, he also wanted to get us out of Afghanistan. And so I guess so that people can understand here, were there only 2 choices? Was it either continue this long war or fully withdraw, or should there have been something in the middle that would have been wiser?
Yeah, I disagree with President Trump as well, and I tried to give him my best advice. And I think what I would do is offer that now to President Biden. There's a lot of emotion here. 2,500 American troops lost their lives. Over 20,000 were injured, 170,000 killed civilians, mostly in Afghanistan, in 20 years. This is something that's not easy to resolve. But President Biden is showing what I consider this continuation bias now, this desire to stick with the original plan despite all of the changing obvious conditions. He's kind of doubling down. What he needs to do is consider that we've not only withdrawn our support for the Afghan military, who was our bulwark against the reconstitution of this global home base, essentially, for the violent Islamic Salafist movement. And it will be the new rallying call for all of the global Islamists that mean us harm. And it's going to happen pretty quickly. So the strategy here was flawed. We can't provide the air support that we need to provide any longer, and President Biden's going to have to reconsider that. A
chilling vision going forward that Afghanistan could once again become a haven for terrorists. Tom Bossert, thanks for coming on a Saturday morning. Really appreciate it. Green light for some people to get an additional vaccine dose, and ABC's Elwin Lopez is in Atlanta with the latest. Elwin, good morning to you.
Hey, Dan, good morning. The CDC says that specific group of immunocompromised people make up less than 3% of the country's population, but about 40% of those hospitalized with breakthrough cases. That third shot, a sign of hope for millions. This morning, a new round of COVID-19 shots in the U.S. A CDC advisory panel recommending a third dose of Pfizer and Moderna for some people with compromised immune systems.
The ACIP is continuing to discuss and deliberate the emerging issues with regard to duration of immunity as different variants emerge. And right now we're focused on the Delta variant.
With some schools back in full swing, classrooms at the center of it all. Chicago Public Schools mandating vaccines for all employees. And in Arizona, a Phoenix high school defying the state's ban on mask mandates by requiring students to mask up. One teacher filing a lawsuit to prevent the school from requiring masks. As districts grapple with face covering rules, some parents say they feel forced to choose between education or the health of their kids. Like former teacher and mom of 2, Jacqueline Destrees, her children testing positive.
It's like I sent my kids to go get sick. That's what I did. There's no reason to make a law against protecting our kids.
This is ICUs across the South are filling up. In Texas, the Lone Star State's hospital's almost at capacity. One patient waiting more than 2 days for a hospital bed.
Wake up, get a clue. It is not like the flu. It is devastating our healthcare system.
North Texas hospitals crippled by the spike in cases, now out of pediatric ICU beds.
We still encourage parents to continue to bring their children to the hospital when they're sick. We will find care for every kid who comes to the hospital.
The virus landing Jessica Gonzalez's 9-year-old son in the hospital.
I was really scared for what was going on because he got really, really sick.
Hospitalizations in the neighboring state of Louisiana hitting its highest point since the beginning of the pandemic.
We're in a bad place, and that's why we have to slow transmission and increase vaccinations.
Walgreens and CVS say they are ready to give out that third arm to needle, both companies saying you should be ready to prove eligibility. Eva?
Elwin Lopez for us there. Thank you.
We begin with an update on the torrential rain that's wreaking havoc in Japan. Downpours continue to pose a threat to people's safety into the night. The highest emergency alert is in place for the western prefectures of Saga, Nagasaki, Fukuoka, and Hiroshima. Weather officials are calling on residents to be ready for disasters, including landslides and flooding. They say people should do whatever is necessary to protect themselves. The meteorological agency says a band of rain clouds over areas including the Kyushu region, Gifu, and Nagano prefectures is dumping record amounts of rain. The agency's highest level alert means people in affected areas should do everything possible to stay safe. If going outside is too dangerous, they should move to the safest place in the building where they currently are. That could be a higher floor or a room that's furthest from any nearby hill or slope. Meanwhile, a river has overflowed in Takeo City, Saga Prefecture, causing flooding in wide areas. The Geospatial Information Authority analyzed photos and footage from the media and social networks to assess the situation. It estimates about 4 square kilometers of land, including rice fields and commercial and residential areas, have been inundated. It says water may have reached as high as 3 meters at some points. In Kyoto City, western Japan, about 8 meters of an embankment under a house near the approach to Kiyomizu Temple collapsed due to heavy rain.
I heard a loud noise and thought it was an earthquake. But when I went outside, I was surprised to see mud, stones, and trees scattered around.
The local fire department says about 40 people had to be evacuated after a gas leak was detected. A level 5 evacuation warning, the highest possible alert, is now in place for more than 1.8 million people across Nagano, Gifu, Shimane, Hiroshima, Fukuoka, Saga, and Nagasaki. Weather officials say the low-pressure system along the rain front will likely move from western to eastern Japan through Sunday night, bringing heavy rainfall to wider areas. They are urging people to exercise extreme caution, warning that disasters on a scale not seen in decades could occur at any moment. Now to the coronavirus situation in the country, where officials in Tokyo confirmed more than 5,000 new infections on Saturday. The figure marks an increase of 528 from last Saturday. This comes after the capital confirmed another record tally the day before, more than 5,700 cases. The 3 prefectures neighboring Tokyo also reported record cases. And in Kanagawa Prefecture, medical facilities are struggling to cope. The occupancy rate for emergency hospital beds designated for coronavirus patients has exceeded 80%. Officials will now apply stricter standards for admitting people to ease the strain on the healthcare system.
We are now on the edge of a cliff. We have to figure out what we can do in this situation. The healthcare system is strained. Our top priority must be to save lives.
Across the country, authorities confirmed 20,151 cases on Saturday. It's the second straight day of more than 20,000 cases. Friday marked the first time the tally crossed this threshold. The health ministry says 1,521 coronavirus patients are now in serious condition. This marks a record high for the second consecutive day. People in Japan are observing a solemn anniversary on Sunday. On August 15th, 1945, a statement from Emperor Showa was broadcast on the radio, announcing that the country had surrendered in World War II. It is the day Japan marks the end of the war and prays for peace. Every year, Japan's government organizes a ceremony in Tokyo to remember approximately 3.1 million people who died in the war. Before the coronavirus pandemic, about 6,000 people would attend the event. Last year, it was scaled down significantly to about 540 people. This year, it will be even smaller as infections continue to spread across Japan. Under 200 people are expected to participate. Many prefectures have decided not to send representatives to Tokyo. Prime Minister Suga Yoshihide will deliver a speech before the participants observe a minute of silence at the stroke of noon. Emperor Naruhito will then make an address. As Japan commemorates the end of the war, there is a shrinking number of people alive who experienced it. Around 3/4 of the relatives of the war dead who will attend the ceremony are over the age of 70. Throughout the day, events to remember the lives lost in the war and reflect on peace will be held across Japan. NHK World Japan will bring you live coverage of the ceremony beginning at 11:52 a.m. Japan time, so please tune in. The U.S. Geological Survey says an earthquake with a magnitude of 7.2 has struck the Caribbean island of Haiti. The agency says the quake occurred at around 12:30 UTC on Saturday. Its focus was about 10 kilometers deep. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration issued a tsunami alert for the country's coastal areas, but it has since been lifted. Haiti still has not fully recovered from an earthquake in January 2010. It killed more than 300,000 people. Hundreds of thousands of people in Afghanistan are being displaced as the Taliban advance across the country. This has raised concerns of a possible humanitarian crisis. The insurgents declared on Saturday they had seized control of the capital of southeastern Paktika province. The Taliban have been expanding control over the country as the U.S. military withdraws. They are now believed to have taken more than half of the country's 34 provincial capitals. The Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees says about 400,000 people have now been displaced in the country this year. The agency says since May, when fighting started to intensify, the overwhelming majority of those displaced have been women and children. It warns of a humanitarian crisis caused by a lack of support. A Japanese jazz pianist badly injured in an anti-Asian attack in New York City has made a comeback. Uno Tadataka took to the stage on Friday at a famed club in the Big Apple. Uno was beaten up by a group of 8 people at a subway station last September. A series of hate crimes against Asians were reported in the U.S. city around that time. The musician sustained a broken right shoulder in the assault. The pianist gave his first performance since the attack at the Blue Note Jazz Club. Uno still has limited movement in his shoulder. He will undergo a second operation in the future.
We loved it. He's amazing. Brilliant, actually. Thank you. Thank you.
I feel grateful to be able to play music again with my fellow musicians. I was filled with emotion being back on stage.
Tadataka Uno.